What's up, my dude? Oh, James Stewie. Got him a new podcast, bro. This is kind of cool. I wanted to come in here and have a little chitty chat session on this whole thing because it's been like half a decade since we've heard basically anything out of James Stewart. I think everybody was pretty shocked whenever he made that Instagram post. All through after 2016, right? It was like every year, James Stewart would go out there and do that little ride day with the Yamaha, and then he did the ride day on the Honda, and I swear to God, every year people thought, ooh, is James Stewart going to come back? 2017, then 2018 would come around. Is James Stewart going to come back? And then kind of started getting to that point where it's like, okay, he's not coming back. He's not going to race, right? He's not coming back to pro racing. It just got to that point where it was pretty obvious. And then, obviously we got to that point where then James Stewart finally comes out and says he's actually retiring. It's been one of the most bizarre, fadeaway questions out the ass about, he's just been very distant, right? James Stewart has been very distant from the public media motocross eye for so long at this point. It's pretty crazy to now all of a sudden he's getting full-blown into, motocross podcasting. So it's going to be called Bubba's World, right? It's kind of throwback to his old show that he had. This is probably the biggest sort of, I don't know. James Stewart's created this exclusive, oh my God, dude, we got to tune in to what James Stewart is saying. He's really built that over the past 4 or 5 years with his lack thereof, communication with the public and Instagram post. He's been very, very light with all that. Obviously he had his kids and trying to raise his kids, trying to have a normal life, because the super hardcore pro motocross life is definitely something very different than your everyday, ordinary. I'm sure James Stewart just wanted to get away from all that motocross shit for a few years and, live a normal life at some point in his life, you know what I mean? So I can't blame him at all for doing what he did, but nonetheless, it's been a long time since we've really heard anything out of James Stewart. I don't think he's riding a whole lot in real life. I still think just about all he does riding-wise is when he goes out there on those ride days for everybody that gets invited from Freestone, right? I still think that's the only time he's really riding. He's not even really riding in real life. It's funny, people thought he was going to come back and actually pro race in 17, 18, 19, right? I pretty much knew he was done after 16. You could just see it. You could just see with the way he was riding and the stuff that happened. And I don't know. It's pretty much riding on the wall at that point. But I still consider James Stewart the fastest person to ever ride a dirt bike in the history of mankind. I don't think you're ever going to get another guy that you can say was faster on a dirt bike. I'm not necessarily saying the best or the best at winning a championship or the most consistent or anything like that. We all know James Stewart, Crash Boy, right? But as far as raw speed on the dirt bike, when they said he was the fastest man on the planet, they weren't kidding around. You know what I mean? You can't question James Stewart's speed on a dirt bike. That's one thing you will never be able to question. But nonetheless, let's actually get into talking about this podcast. So, the thing I'm most interested in, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are most interested in with this, is, how deep is James Stewart going to get into everything that he's going to talk about on the podcast? I think we're all wanting him to get in there and talk about, everything that happened with his suspension from AMA, with all of the whatever drug or whatever he was taking, There's a lot of questions that need to be answered on that front, and I'm really curious to see if one of these podcast episodes he really tackles that, and just comes out and says, hey, this is what happened. This is what's going on. That time, all that weird shit where did he get arrested or what was the deal with that back? That was a long time ago. I mean, that was like 08, 09. I don't know. That was forever ago when that happened. But obviously the suspension happened right there like 2015, right? So he's had a couple crazy things that's happened through his career that would be very interesting to hear about in a podcast. And it's certain things that, like, you can only really hear it from James Stewart's mouth, you know what I mean? Because the media and all that, they've said everything you could imagine about it, but, like, and James Stewart's been very vague when it comes to all of these big, these big drama situations that he's been through. He's been pretty vague with it, which still leaves a lot of questions from the fans, and really want to get that shit answered. And a podcast is like the perfect way to do that, So that's my biggest, sort of wonder, I guess you could say, with this new James Stewart Bubba World podcast is like how nitty gritty, deep, truthful, talking it real talk, how much of it is going to be like that. And from what I've seen so far, it looks pretty good. It looks like he ain't really holding anything back, he's speaking his mind, and you got to give mad props to that always. Seems like we're living in a world where everybody's trying to be politically correct and try to say every little thing perfect and walk on these eggshells. And it's like, fuck, dude, that's boring as hell. That is boring as hell. If you're going to run a podcast in today's world, you better have something interesting to it. You're not going to be able to be a neutral boy and monotoned and politically correct. You're just not going to be able to do that in this day and age of podcasting world, because you got dudes like Joe Rogan, all these other guys that are really speaking their mind and not scared to get into a little bit of drama with what they say and shit like that. You know what I mean? They're not you can't play it safe in this podcast world. So I think it's imperative. It is important for James Stewart to realize that and, not try to be, too careful with what he says, because, like, that's why we're watching that shit. We want to hear the real talk. We want to get all those real opinions on all of those moments through his career that only he can really speak on, Time he landed on Carmichael. Shit, there's a lot. The fucking hardcore battles he got in with Reed, That's going to be the cool stuff to listen to when you hear James Stewart himself really be no sugarcoating real talk about all of those particular instances that happened. And that's really what I feel like is going to make his podcast succeed or not succeed. It's all going to come down to how real is he going to be. And like I say, from what I've seen so far, it looks like it's the real deal. So, but yeah, it's a cool thing. And, obviously Stewart did that whatever Supercross stuff where he was going Supercross, like rewind or whatever. I don't know what they called that, but where he went in there and talked about each main event after it happened. So he's kind of slowly been getting back into that media. That would have been in like the start of 2020. And then obviously everything happened in the world. So kind of probably put a damper on some of the stuff, the ease of him being able to do certain things, right? But now he seems to start to be getting back into it. Now, let me address something right here. I know a lot of people, including David Pingree, some other media guys out there, they have this opinion of like, oh my gosh, James Stewart has to be going in there and doing these riding videos like 3 or 4 times a year, and he really needs to do that, and go out to Glamis and just rip it up and break the internet with a video. James Stewart out at Glamis just ripping the sand and all this stuff. Like, basically making this argument of like James Stewart needs to make 3 or 4 real life riding videos like throughout the year and blow up the internet and make these big YouTube videos and stuff. Listen, no matter how cool that would be, no matter how cool that sounds, like, at the end of the day, like, James Stewart's already done his thing. You know what I mean? He's already been that guy. He's been the fastest guy on the bike. He's done everything. He did all that straight rhythm stuff. He did it on the 2-stroke, did it on the 4-stroke. like you really shouldn't expect. I hate whenever we get to this point where the media or certain people just expect these retired riders to do like what Villopoto is doing, even though it's cool and it's awesome what Villopoto is doing, getting back on a 125, doing those dream races, getting with Yamaha, testing out all the bikes. Even though all that shit is awesome, like, James Stewart is not obligated to do that in any kind of way. If he never wants to make another video of him riding a dirt bike ever again, that's totally fine. That's not like a... And I ain't got nothing against David Pinger either. He's awesome too. David Pinger's a cool dude. But I'm just saying, I think with everybody, they want to see those James Stewart riding videos so bad that they forget that, like, dude's not obligated to do this shit, And if Stewart just wants to do podcast and go golfing and not ever really, really ride a dirt bike ever again, if anybody's earned it, James Stewart's earned that right. You know what I mean? He's earned that ability to be like, nah, bruh, I don't want to really get back on a dirt bike. Like, I don't want to have to, because you know how it is. Even if Stewart wanted to go in there and do some silly videos where he's out there ripping on a damn KX 125 or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Everybody's so critical on the internet that everybody's going to be like, oh, man, Stewart's lost his skill. Stewart's not as good anymore. Stewart sucks. Stewart can't even ride the bike. Stewart's been on the couch too much eating tater chips, I can just already see the sea of comments, no pun intended. We'll see what all happens out of it, but still at the end of the day, if Stewart decides he doesn't want to do any of that, that's fine. At least he's back to the point where he's having some sort of social media interaction, you know what I mean? Hell, he didn't even post on his Instagram for like 3 years or more, so at least you're getting some kind of interaction again with Stewart, with this podcast, and that's all you can really expect out of it at this point, right? So we'll see kind of how that develops and what happens with it, but yeah, really cool to see. Finally, Stewart's doing it. Looks like it's pretty good quality. They seem to have everything going, got a lot of good ideas for, Stewart to talk about certain things in podcast and stuff, so be cool to see like Chad Reed as a guest on a Stewart, podcast, or Carmichael as a guest on a Stewart podcast, or Villopoto, they could bring all them boys in, and it would be pretty cool in that kind of sense, I don't know if Stewart's ever going to start working with, Supercross again as being like a, any kind of an announcer, or I think that would be cool if Stewart hopped up in the booth with Carmichael and whoever the fuck, and did a little bit of commentary on the Supercross main events, throughout the Supercross season as kind of like an extra guy. I think that would be sick if they did that at some point. But yeah, I mean, obviously Stewart's got his 7-gear stuff, and if he's going to continue to promote that and promote all of the Freestone Championship coming to his house and all that stuff, he had to do something. Malcolm Stewart can't just pull the entire load here, you know what I mean? Like, Stewart's going to have to, this whole time I was thinking he should have never been that distant from social media. It was fine if he wanted to be distant from riding, and doing like riding videos or whatever, but to be that distant from social media for that long when you're that big of a celebrity, as you could call it, certainly in the motorsport industry, he needed to come back when it comes to social media interaction, right? And it seems like we're finally going to start getting that here. So that's badass. Nonetheless, of anything else, at least we're getting James Stewart back in a internet social media sense, so that's really cool. But either way, definitely let me know down in the comments what you guys think about the podcast, and I'll take a look. Either way, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. Later, dudes.